the surgeon that you are.
Well,
My goodness, when I think of the things that you did, I mean, this gentleman, I can't begin to tell you the types of surgery that this gentleman did, that ordinarily doctors will be sending them to Mayo Clinic, Cleveland Clinic, to Cincinnati, to UC, and yet this gentleman was doing it. He wasn't just doing hernias, he wasn't just doing gallbladders. This gentleman was resecting pancreatic tumors, and patients were living almost decades afterwards. That was unheard of. So how do you tell me then that your education was lacking? You just had the innate sense?
Well, not so much the education, it was actually the doing it. Of course, I don't know if you followed, it was in the Wall Street Journal, in the New York Times, in Chicago Tribune, in Des Moines Register. All of them had op-eds concerning Dr. Tom Starzl, who was the first surgeon to successfully transplant a liver. And he was a year behind me in school, and I knew Tom a little bit. And when you read his story is, he wrote his an autobiography called The Puzzle People. And he was recognized by all these papers when he died. He died in March, last month, the beginning of March. And at my 50th class reunion, he was honored with the by the university with a gold medal for outstanding scientific achievements. And he writes about the trials and tribulations of liver transplantation. And he also writes about Claude Bernard, who actually visited him in Colorado during this time, and he said it was about 3 weeks later that Bernard in South Africa did the first heart transplant. And Starzl, of course, had a lot of experience with kidney transplants, and his big thrust was trying to find drugs that would prevent organ rejection, and that's what he spent his time on, besides learning how to harvest livers and transplanting them.
Where was he working, Dr. Frabel, at the time? Was he with Mayo? Was he with a big institute, or was he on his own?
No, he took it, well, first of all, he took a year off from medical school and got his PhD in neurology, came back to medical school, and then when he graduated not only with an MD but with a PhD. Of course, he had his master's. Then he went to Johns Hopkins through their surgical program, and then he came back to Northwestern for several years, and then he finally went out to the University of Colorado, where he did a lot of his work, and then he finally moved to University of Pittsburgh, where he did more of the liver transplants, and of course headed up the Department of Transplantation.
What I couldn't...
Brilliant guy, smart guy, and that was something. But anyway, when you read books like that, you realize how how poorly your training has been, and it's just, even as I read the Harvey Cushing book, and of course he went to Yale and medical school at Harvard, and now he is doing his residency at Johns Hopkins under Halsted, William Halsted, who was an outstanding surgeon at the beginning of the 20th century.
But when I think of the scope of how surgery has changed from the time that you started even up until the time you retired, I mean, the
Oh,
developments were just outstanding
Yeah, well, just,
without even specializing.
Yeah.
I mean, if you talk about general surgery per se, I mean,
Well,
you know, this,
general surgery is pretty much out. Now it's not like it used to be, and rightly so. You just can't, with all the information that's out there and all the techniques that are out there, you just cannot handle it. So you gotta have a small area in which you're good at, and that's it. Even in orthopedics, it's broken down. I don't know what Dr. Swanson does, but I'm sure that he does a lot of joints, and I know that Beacon Orthopedics, they have some of their surgeons who just do.
yes, they do ankles, they do hips,
Yeah,
they do
just
knees,
one-
yes.
one thing, that's all they do.
Subspecialized, yes.
Yeah, and that's what it takes to become really good at it, and you can't be doing a lot of other things.
Well, I have to admit, unto this day, when I see people, they ask me how you are, have I talked to you? And then I will inevitably meet some person who tells me how you saved her life, his life, their son's life, their wife's life. And I remember case after case when you did things like that. And I also remember Gary saying to me, you know how he does it? And I said, no. And he says, I sit there and hold, and he knows this is a good cell, this is a bad cell. This is a good cell, that's a bad cell. And he said, and that's what Frank has.
Well, you can tell him that he's blind now and he can't hear.
Oh.
But that's the way it goes. It goes with the territory, I guess. And so that's it. One thing, talking about the schools again, I think I have a brick from the old school down here. It was torn down, and I remember, I think I was down there when they were demolishing it, and I remember the lumber that came out of that building.
Mm-hmm.
It was something. I mean, it was really, I'm sure that somebody is able to use that wood. But I have a brick from that building.
I remember when it burned down, and I drove my car around to that back entrance that used to take you down to what were the tennis courts. And I looked in that back door, and you could see down to the tunnel underneath the floor.
Yeah.
And my father, at the time of the building's demolishing, still had a basketball record in that gym. I wish I had known, foresight would have been great, because his name was still up there on that roster for
Who's
us.
that?
My dad, Ed Daugherty.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, yeah.
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 Well, the mother of Mrs. Moeller, the math teacher, and
Betty Watts.
Yes, Betty Watts.
and Gail Slayback, they were sisters, of course. The mother had the little store down here in
Yes.
Manchester.
Yes, yes.
You remember that?
Watts' store. We used to call it Abby's.
Yeah,
Yeah. Bev Strassmeyer's a sister too, isn't she?
yeah. And of course,
Yep.
that was something that was part of, I guess, the school experience.
It was indeed.
And of course, I remember when the school, this is more recently, when the school, the elementary school was put on probation by the state. And I was involved in some meetings down there with the principal, and I can't remember his name.
Dan Belmer?
No, no.
No?
No, this is more recent, and I remember that Fee Ellinghausen was there, and anyway, what had happened, that the scores were low, and he pointed out while we were in the meeting, he said, "Now you wait until next year," because he knew the classes so well. And the class that had taken the exam, unfortunately, was not particularly well endowed intellectually. It was just that kind of group. But he knew of the groups that were to follow. And sure enough, the following year, the scores, I think they scored the best of a large district down here. Third grade scores on the I-STEP examinations. And that was one of the things that we discussed about the appropriateness of I-STEP evaluation, because it would vary so much from year to year depending on the class mix. You know, if all your kids are smart, you're going to do very well. But if you happen to have a class in which that's not the case, well, you're going to look bad. And of course, the school got off probation after about a year, and I was always concerned about that and about that kind of government oversight, that they draw conclusions which were not well based. You can't do it on a year's time. If you keep seeing the same low scores over a period of time, then I think it becomes a more valid marker. Like in today's paper that I got, why, you look at the scores, third grade scores on math and language and that type of thing, and you see them consistently over the past 3 years in the 60s or 65, that's about it. Then you wonder, you said, you know, why is it that low? And I think that's what you need to address in trying to improve the teaching, or trying to find the right questions to ask. Why is this happening? Why can't we be in 75 to 80% levels instead of 60 or 65% levels?
When we started the conversation, you mentioned a lot of teachers' names that you had remembered.
Yes.
Who were some of the teachers while you were on the school board or otherwise that you had some personal conversations with that you might recall, or that you remember their some of their traits, good and bad, or?
Well, not really.
Did you ever have to have a talk with a teacher while you're on the school board, a private talk about anything, or were there any incidents that you remember?
No.
Other than the ones you mentioned?
Well, it seemed to me that my impression, as I remember it, was that the school board was over here, then the principals, and the teachers were over here. And the teachers and the school board, they were separated. And occasionally at our meetings we would have the principal in the meeting, but I don't remember ever having teachers, a teacher or teachers, at board meetings. And the other thing was that the superintendent was also between the board and the teachers.
And who were some of your co-members on the school board? You had mentioned some of those names, but did you have a good relationship with them? Or?
Yeah, well, you mean the other members?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Well, you know, you remember Merle Fox. He was always a pleasant guy and down to earth, and Nelson Beer, and of course the Beer boys, and of course his wife had that dress shop downtown on 2nd Street for quite some time. And that's another embarrassing moment when the gentleman came from Terre Haute, and we were standing out in the hall before the graduation started. School board members were there, standing around, and I introduced the school board members, and I came to Nelson Beer, and I drew a blank. And and I said, "This is Mr. Nelson," and I couldn't come up with beer, and we'd been on the board, I think, for a full year together. And you know, I remember that so well. Oh boy.
That's from having a full mind of ideas.
Yeah.
Sometimes you forget a name.
Yeah. That's right.
Who else was on the board with you? Was this a 3-person board?
Well,
Polly Newman.
Oh yeah, you mentioned Polly.
yeah, Paula Newman and Merle and Nelson and myself. I think there was one more person. I'm trying to think who it was.
Was it by district that you were appointed?
What's that?
Was it by district that you were appointed? Polly would have been out of North Hogan. You would have been here in town. Was there maybe somebody out in Cochrane or
Manchester?
Manchester way or something?
Yes, I'm not sure.
Were you on with John Sutton? Or he was on after you?
I think he was after me,
Yeah.
John.
Because I think they probably would have been from the same vicinity.
Mm-hmm.
Are we keeping you from your supper?
What was that?
Are we keeping you from your supper? It's almost
No,
6 o'clock.
I didn't. What time is it?
It's almost 6 o'clock.
Well, no. Doesn't take me long to get supper.
Did you ever go on any outings with the school board? They used to go to like an annual convention or anything? Did you get to go to any of those?
No, while I was on the school board, did not go to any state meetings or anything like that. I think back then, the school system was pretty much,
Very local.
yeah, very much local. It's only become a state and national thing after I was on the school board.
I had read some of the old city minutes where they actually brought up, that was on the agenda, they bring up school issues at city council because they were in charge of the schools. So you were on one of the first school boards. Yeah. What about Ben Withard? Was Ben Withard on with you, or is he before? He might have been on before.
I think he was on before.
Yeah.
He was a real estate guy, wasn't he?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
You see a lot of these pictures and things in the old annuals that we have, and those are some of the names that come to my mind that maybe you served with. But
were you with the Wizard boys?
Yes.
Oh yeah, yeah. I was with the youngest, Joe.
Uh-huh.
He and Glenn and I were all in the same class.
The
Well.
twins were in my class. They had twin boys that were in my class.
What are some of the other families you remember? You had a large family. The Withards had a large family.
Yeah.
The Cooks, you remember the Cook boys?
Yeah, the Cook boys.
Mm-hmm. Patrick was the one I was thinking of the other day. Patrick and Mike, Jim.
You took care of a lot of families at the hospital, that's for sure.
Yeah.
They we're probably worn you out. We wear you out.
Oh no,
We're trying. We're trying to.
I welcome your coming. You live alone, and that's the reason why I look forward to Pam coming this next week. She'll be here, and you find yourself talking to yourself,
I do that all the time.
and that's it. And of course, you live. For me, I have to live a lot slower than I used to. But it takes me a long time to read a book, but that's one of my outlets, and to do that.
Well, isn't that a good part of retirement, that you don't have to hurry now? You can take your time.
Well, I've got another one. Garth got me a book about a month ago on Bellevue, the hospital in New York, which would be like Cook County Hospital in Chicago, which is no longer known as Cook County, but anyway, it's that kind of hospital. And
That was the insane asylum at one time, wasn't it?
what was that?
Was that the mental asylum a long time ago, Cook County?
No, the Bellevue. I
Bellevue,
think.
that's right.
Yeah, Bellevue.
And
Yeah,
it's
Cook
early.
County now, what is it, Sloger, or it's like Kroger, but it's not, it's Stroger, I guess it is. It's named after a chairman of the commissioner up there or something anyway. They renamed it in 2000. No longer Cook County, but that was a good hospital when I was going to medical school. You'd see things there you never see again, and it was something. I look forward to the times I would go out there for clinics.
I wish you could have seen the facility Mike went to at Mayo in Florida.
What's that?
I said, I wish you could have seen the Mayo facility that my husband went to when he went for his transplant in Florida. Boy, you talk about something else.
Yeah. Well, it's,
People from all over the world coming there,
yeah,
doctors from all over the world
Yeah.
practicing there.
that was a good book. I read that one.
The Mayo brothers.
Well, I read that, I think, the summer before I went to medical school. I'd gotten out of the service, and I went up to the library and I got it out. It was written by a woman by the name of Clapsaddle, called The Brothers Mayo,
Mm-hmm.
and it was a good story about,
I read it when I was down there.
yeah, that was a good one. So, good stories. Good stories.
I don't think you can hear this, but we're going to get some storms here in a little bit. It's starting to thunder and rain.
What was that?
I said, I don't think you can hear it, but we're going to get a storm here in a little bit. It's starting to thunder and rain.
Well,
And I parked on Manchester Street.
Yeah.
Well, you want to wrap it up?
Yes.
I'll tell you,
well,
have
Richard, is your mom still down at Hill Forest?
Oh, yes, they just opened on the
I
1st.
saw that.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Well,
They spent, I forget how many days and hours cleaning to get ready,
well,
which they do every year, but she said they had a nice large group of people to help this year, but it still took many days and many hours to get things ready.
well.
Dr. Frabel, can you give us a good smile for a picture? There you got it. There you got it right there.
Oh, no.
There you
That's
go.
it.
Oh, boy.
We got it.
You got it. Who's taking the pictures?
Dan,
Dan is.
Dan. Okay.
he's a photographer. He takes pictures of his pictures.
Well,
We'll keep you in touch as far as our progress here. You know,
All right.
we'd certainly like to have your input if you have any suggestions for us.
okay. Well, if I think of anything else, I'll let you know.
Sure.
you have a beautiful house here.
Well, thank you.
At least what I see of it, and it's.
Yeah.
And who does your house cleaning? It's immaculate.
Well, I try to keep it clean and everything. I got the markers on the floor so I can get around. I can just help me see to get around.
He used to tell me to put the pins on curtains. Why not? Wouldn't you expect that of a surgeon?